Good to see you again. Have an exciting conversation because I was just getting to chat with Brendan backstage. So we have a lot of, I think, interesting, timely things to cover.
That guy looks really serious.
Yeah, he
like
does.
He had a real serious
The American
job.
flag's behind him, right?
Yeah.
Stuff. I'm just in front of a lake, which feels much more boring than the American flags.
So I worked there for almost, not quite 3 years, and every day I felt like I was getting into costume. So I feel much more at home.
This is what you're. This is the real life.
This is the actual life, right?
Well, Brendan, first, before we get into the conversation of your work both at the Pentagon and now your work in the private sector, just want to set the stage a bit with America's military and the threats that it faces from climate change. I mean, we have naval bases on the coast that are seeing sea level rise. They're seeing flooding on sunny days. We have Army and Marine Corps bases inland there where they're trying to train in these intense heat environments. How would you describe the threat that climate change, what the threat that climate change is to America's military?
Well, I think the one word that I would use to describe it is existential, right? But I'll sort of break that down military style. So we'll go tactical, strategic, and then we'll go geopolitical. From a tactical perspective, climate change is a game changer for the department. Carbon dioxide increasing in the air drives acidification of the ocean. When you acidify the ocean, sonar works differently. It makes our submarines more detectable when the ocean is acidified. So that, submarines don't want to be seen by anybody, right? So if sonar is more effective, our submarines are more vulnerable. That undercuts their ability to do their deterrence mission and their, if they have to do the offensive mission as well. So that's a challenge, right? Planes, same way. When you increase the amount of heat in the air, it changes the physics of flight.
The planes can't carry as much cargo or as many people when it's really hot, right?
Right.
Just can't get off the ground.
Right, and it's sort of a self-reinforcing loop, right? So if you have to do more sorties in order to accomplish the same mission, those planes are generating huge amounts of GHG emissions, right? CO2 emissions, which creates more warming, which creates more capability degradation, which drives a cycle of perpetual, which increases ocean acidification, which makes our submarines more vulnerable, right?
At the same time, the coastal bases are flooding on a sunny day.
So that's tactical, and the strategic is the installation lens. The Department of Defense over the last 5 years has experienced at least $5 billion weather-related disasters. Tyndall Air Force Base, Offutt Air Force Base, Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, Anderson Air Force Base and Naval Base Guam were hit by a super typhoon a couple of years ago, and they're saying that the bill for that damage is going to be in the $7 to $15 billion range, right? That's a significant amount of investment that the department then needs to make, which takes away from other readiness and strategic priorities. And the last piece is sort of the geopolitical destabilization that comes with refugee associated with climate change, right? So if sea level rise is impacting where people live, if heat is driving them out of places where they live, all of that changes the geopolitics, which makes the relationships between nations uncertain, which is risk, right? So I don't think there's an aspect of the Department of Defense that isn't impacted in one way or another by climate change.
And should also note that it was the Department of Defense, I think it was in the early 90s, I'm blanking on the year, but was one of the first to really say, hey, climate change is a problem. This is a threat to America's military readiness.
Yeah. Pilots and sailors really care about weather.
And so when we think about those threats, and then in context of this current administration that seems to just want to ignore or deny climate change, what do you see as the impact being on the men and women who are charged with keeping all of us safe?
Yeah, it's capability degradation is the biggest concern that I have. The ability for a military installation to have sovereign energy security is something that is kind of the holy grail of every mission commander. The reality is that 99% of the electricity that a DoD installation uses today is generated, transmitted, and distributed to that installation via the civilian power grid. Right, so the civilian power grid, which we know is both a kinetic and a cyber attack vector in any peer conflict, is under stress or is degraded in its capability or completely offline the mission of the installation is at risk. So that is sort of the strategic and tactical challenge associated with not increasing investment in energy resources on installations that don't have logistics tails.
So can I refine this a bit and say, like, let's just talk about domestic U.S. military installations. They're relying on the same power grid that we all have at home. During a heat wave, increasing demand from AI data centers puts a strain on that grid, and when it goes down, that means that the military base is also in the dark, without air conditioning, without heat in the winter, right? Like, that's what we're talking about.
Not exactly. The critical missions are backed up by energy resources that are resident on the installations for now. But the non-critical needs of the installation are compromised, right? So family housing, I have yet to meet a garrison commander or an installation commander who has identified the family housing on their installation as a critical load, mission critical load, which is short-sighted in my opinion.
Because why is that?
Well, because, look, DoD service members are the most professional military and best military in the world. And the people who choose to serve in those roles come to work still as people, right? So if an airman shows up and the air conditioning is out in their house in Texas and it's 105 degrees, they're concerned about their kids, their spouse, their partners that are living in those conditions, and they don't show up the version of themselves that we need them to be for their critical missions, right? And that extends beyond the boundaries of just the fences of the installation. 70% of DoD personnel live in defense communities that surround the installations, right? So if you just take one layer out from that and you degrade the capability of the energy or water to service that defense community, that's a disruption maybe in their ability to get to work, maybe certainly in their ability to sort of care about their family and make sure that they're okay. All of those things compound to be a direct risk and a direct challenge to readiness.
So when we think about wind power, solar power, certainly combined with battery, if a military base and the community that are interconnected, if they have independence from the grid, they don't need a pipeline to deliver fuel, they don't need a fuel truck to show up. That's actually the epitome of energy independence and security, right?
Energy security for sure, yeah. And I would say that the interdependence is the way that I had always thought and continue to think of it, because you can't have a military installation with its complete mission intact without the defense community that surrounds it. So there is a critical interdependence between those two requirements.
And so we're seeing this administration pull back from some of these efforts, which were happening under President Biden.
Yeah.
But you were saying there's a lot of bad news. There are some bright spots in the current administration.
Yeah, a couple bright spots I think that are I don't want to call them holdovers because that might put them at risk. But what I would call them is sort of recognition of the interdependence of certain aspects of built environment and infrastructure supporting mission readiness. So when during the first couple of years of the Biden administration, there was significant progress made on the backs of climate response. Billions of dollars of DoD investment went into looking into things like extreme weather patterns, sea level rise, how we can plan better and deploy microgrids and electric vehicles and those types of things. About midway through the administration, the sort of enthusiasm for that started to wane. And that was because DoD, and I think this is a very, very good thing, looks like America, right? Certain people are motivated by climate and want to do things, and other people are not. So we had sort of captured all the people in the department who were motivated to do climate-related stuff, and we had to figure out a message that was going to resonate with all the other folks that are in the military and their families. So we pivoted into talking about resilience and health as a mechanism to meet people where they are, and then create a door that would let them walk through to show up and arrive at a solution set that had a benefit from a resilience perspective or a human health perspective that happen to also have climate co-benefit, right? So the primary motivation for eliminating natural gas cooking in military family housing was a human health focus, right?
You don't want to be breathing in the fumes and the pollution from that.
But if you get rid of that point source of carbon dioxide emissions, there's a climate benefit, right? What we enabled with a strategy that we called the Resilient and Healthy Defense Community Strategy was we opened the door for people to walk through to see the fact that a heat pump coupled with an electric vehicle was resilience, as well as, yeah, fine.
We don't have to say the C word, right?
The climate stuff
We don't have to say that.
But the primary motivation that we were opening and creating was that mechanism to be able to say, this is the thing that you need for resilience and for human health.
And so thinking about some of those efforts which have been discontinued, ones which are still being prioritized and continued are nuclear power, geothermal energy.
Yep.
Those are the two that you would highlight?
Yeah, I would say that the sort of energy interdependence and energy space has been shifting around a little bit, but mission commanders understand that their risk profile decreases when you bring power closer, logistics tail free energy closer to the installation. So those are continuing. I think that there's no climate.mil is not a thing anymore. Neither is the Defense Climate Assessment tool. Neither is the Defense Sea Level Rise tool. Those have been pushed aside. But what we've seen is an understanding that mission readiness is dependent on more than just the things that can be done by piping in or trucking in fuel across fence lines.
So for people who are listening to this, and I've heard a couple of reactions when you've talked about everything from our submarines being more detectable to planes not being able to take off in the heat, people that are concerned about this, what's the message that you would have for them? Because it seems like this has been made into a political issue, but I would argue that America's military readiness is an everyone issue.
Yeah.
That's not a political issue.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I think that I had a degree of optimism during the transition that there would be a concerted pushback against taking away capability from combatant commanders and their down echelon folks. I think that the reality of the challenge that we face is one that makes it, you cannot make a concrete argument to say that it is a good idea for Guam, which is an island in the second island chain in the Indo-Pacific. If you don't know that Guam is a U.S. territory, is the sort of tip of the spear of the U.S. response to PRC aggression in the Indo-Pacific, and there is no logistics story that can be told that is a good one if your complete energy plan is to put diesel fuel on a ship and send it 2 weeks to Guam, right? There is no logistics plan for which that works in the event of any conflict in the Indo-Pacific. So that understanding of the logistics, the contested logistics challenges in the Indo-Pacific are realities for the people who live and work and do the work of deterrence in the Indo-Pacific, and they're sort of pushing and driving and understanding that their lifeblood is something that they cannot rely on in a contested environment, and they're driving at making sure that the energy resources and the generation capacity is not contingent on those logistics tails.
And these are clearly things that are still very important and relevant to you now that you've pivoted willingly or not from Department of Defense to the private sector. Talk to us about your work with Blackfest.
Yeah, so I sort of spend my time at the intersection of energy transition and human health for the reasons that I talked about a second ago, but primarily because the signal that we have to be able to continue to drive. I think the E2 presentation was fascinating, as was Tyler's presentation about the interconnection of human health and other aspects. All of those things, that confluence of why and what, is something that I find both fascinating, but also something around which the story becomes more compelling, right? I have relatives who live in Southwestern Virginia, and they don't see the world like I do. So we connect on regional air quality issues, and we connect on what's healthy for their grandkids. So the health piece of the work that I've been doing has been centered on what is the built environment that's created to look like an intentional place to create spaces that enable people to thrive. All of that is dependent on a decarbonized energy system, right? So bringing those two things together is the work that I've been trying to do with the consulting that I'm up to right now.
Excellent. And as we kind of wrap up here, you can take this whichever way I think makes most sense for you. Either given your work, given what you're seeing happen under this current administration with energy, with our defense, is there something that gives you hope, or is there something that you think people can engage with to make sure that hope remains?
Yeah, I think the thing that I draw the most hope from are the people that I was very honored to work with in the Department of Defense are among the best people that I've ever met in my life. And their resilience, their commitment, their sense of mission and duty is something that I draw an endless amount of optimism around. But the other thing that I was lucky to be able to be exposed to in the job that I did in the Pentagon was the relationship between the installation and the communities that surround them. Those defense communities have such pride in the support that they give to the military installations that they are interdependent with, right? The
people that are cooking lunch at the restaurant, people that are dry cleaning uniforms, like even the seemingly small things are important.
They're vitally important, and the communities feel and understand their piece of readiness and mission. So the combination of those two things is the thing that I draw the most hope from, because there is the ability for the communities to take local level action that will make the energy transition real for Fort Liberty or Fort Moore. And those types or Mountain Home, just around the corner here, right? Those types of relationships aren't reliant on a defense community that wants to stand up and do renewable energy and batteries to support their installation. They don't need the permission of the federal government in order to do that, right? So those things and the understanding of the commitment that the communities have to the installation and the installations have to the communities, overlaying those two things, and then looking to make sure that both of the efforts, all of the efforts of all of those people in collaboration are focused on making sure that the mission can be accomplished gives me hope that they're going to arrive at the set of solutions that the last administration was really sort of pushing, and this one seems to have maybe de-emphasized a little bit.
Yeah, well, hopefully still some good things to come, and appreciate your work that you continue to do.
Right.
Brendan Owens, thanks for a great conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks.